Ladies and gentlemen, we are going to get underway. There are a few little bits and pieces that I want to run through with you. Let me first say, though, a very warm welcome to OECD Week 2015 and to the OECD Forum 2015, Investing in the Future, People, Planet, Prosperity. My name is Axel Threlfall. I'm an editor-at-large with Reuters in London. I'm delighted to be back as Master of Ceremony for this fascinating event. As you can see from the agenda, we've got an action-packed couple of days ahead. As I'm sure you're aware, the forum will run today and tomorrow, back-to-back with the OECD Ministerial Council meeting, which will be held tomorrow and Thursday. The Netherlands is the chair of the ministerial meeting this year. There are 3 co-chairs, Czech Republic, France, and Korea. This forum and the Ministerial Council meeting come, of course, at a critical juncture as key decisions will be taken this year on the post-2015 development agenda with the adoption of the new Sustainable Development Goals and the crucial COP21 climate change summit, which will be held here in Paris, of course, in December. Investment is also a key theme. It's something we'll hear a lot this week, as the urgency to create more and better jobs makes investment policy one of the most important tools to overcome the crisis, but also to build trust, confidence, and more resilient economies and inclusive societies. So, as I said, we've got a busy agenda, meet the author sessions, idea factory sessions, talk together sessions, lunch debates, plenty to get our teeth into. As we address the 3 Ps, people, planet, and prosperity. Of course, we've got the presentation of the economic outlook tomorrow morning with the Secretary General. The forum will be opened shortly by the Secretary General Angel Gurria, Helen Clark, Administrator at UNDP, and Ségolène Royal, France's Minister for the Environment, Sustainable Development and Energy. Before that, as I said, there is one thing I'd like to do, and that's the reason I'm up here, and that is introduce you to, or at least reacquaint you with Wisembly, which is the technology that we use here at the forum that allows you to engage with speakers during the sessions. We do want to encourage as much lively debate as possible before, during, and after the session. So I want to have a go very quickly to allow you to get familiar with this Wisembly tool, which I believe they will put up on screen in just a sec, but it's my job, my task, to run you through how to do this, and we're going to give it a little test run before we begin proceedings today. So here goes. If you could follow along with this, and as I said, the instructions are up on the screen. This is what you need to do to vote and to be interactive during the forum. Connect to the OECD hotspot with your smartphone. When you're connected, go to the website app.wisembly.com and use the keyword OECD Blue to access the interactive platform. You can also participate by Twitter, asking questions with hashtag OECD Blue, and your message will be displayed. And for those who have no smartphone, please ask your questions by SMS. You've all got a flyer on your chairs that explains, probably better than I am, how you use this Wisembly tool. So have a go at that. See if you can log on to that, and then I'm going to pose the first question of the forum, which I'd like you to answer by pressing 1, 2, or 3, and I'll bring you those results before we hear from our speakers this morning. I'll give you just a minute or two to have a go getting onto that session, and the question is this. Which of the forum themes interests you most? Press 1 for people, press 2 for planet, and press 3 for prosperity. Which of the forum themes interests you most? 1 for people, 2 for planet, 3 for prosperity. I'll give it a couple of minutes, let that sink in, and then we'll bring you the results of that. Thank you very much. hopefully you've all had a crack at this Wisembly voting system. I'm going to, as soon as we've got some responses, we're going to put those up. There you go. This is at least the first sign of what your priorities are in the next couple of days. People comes out top, planet followed by prosperity. This is a live app, so this will keep moving as the day goes on, and indeed as the 2 and 3 days go on. So do keep voting. There will be questions posed like this one throughout the forum week, and we do welcome your participation as we want to make this as interactive a forum as we possibly can. After this opening session, we're going to take a break with the next session starting at about 10:15. Those sessions are unlocking investment, addressing inequality, and the sharing economy. I'll mention those again at the end of the opening session. Bear with us. The forum will get underway in just a few moments. Ministers, ambassadors, ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pleasure to introduce your host for OECD Forum 2015, OECD Secretary-General Angel Gurria, and speakers Helen Clark, UNDP Administrator, and Ségolène Royal, France's Minister for the Environment, Sustainable Development and Energy.
Madame la Ministre, Ségolène Royal,
the Minister,
Ministers, Ambassadors, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the 2015 OECD Forum. Welcome to the 2015 OECD Week. Now, as every year, the OECD gathers a unique blend of creative minds, decision makers, and experts from all walks of life to find the solutions to pressing global challenges. This year, we're plunging into the epicenter of economic activity and human progress: investment. Almost 7 years have passed since the beginning of this crisis, and global investment is still weak. It's still hesitant. And one of the greatest paradoxes of modern economic times, we have some of the lowest interest rates in history, while SMEs face difficulties to access finance. Corporations are sitting on trillions of dollars of liquidity, shied away by what they find is an uncertain economic environment, while financial investors seem oblivious to risk, eagerly searching for ever higher yields. Now, the evidence is sobering. The flows of fixed investment in OECD countries are still well below their pre-crisis level. In the euro area in particular, it stands 17% below the early 2008 level. That is the pre-crisis level. Global foreign direct investment inflows have also been shrinking. After contracting in 2012, they were practically flat in 2013, and they declined again in 2014. Now, let me put it bluntly. We need to fix this broken engine to leave the crisis behind. If we don't get the investment going, we will not get growth going. Stronger investment is important, not only to sustain the cyclical recovery, but also it is critically important to raise productivity. That's why we're here today. We need an internationally coordinated strategy to revive investment. We need to change our investment practices to build a brighter future in order to activate investment flows again. We need to focus our investments in the 3 Ps of human progress: people, planet, and prosperity, around which we built the themes of this meeting. This time, we need to facilitate investments that focus on people. After 7 years of crisis, more than 200 million people remain unemployed globally. Now, This is 30 million more than before the crisis. And inequalities are reaching record levels. According to our recent study on inequality, we just put it out last week, it's called In It Together, and the subtitle is Why Reducing Inequality Benefits All. The numbers say that the average income of the richest 10% in the OECD countries now represent nearly 10 times the average income of the poorest 10%. So what would you say? What do the numbers suggest? Well, it was 7 to 8 times a generation ago. That means that in one generation, inequality has grown by 30 to 40%. This is the extent of the problem. This inequality has become a serious obstacle for growth. It is also creating the equivalent of a power failure in our democratic systems, with public trust eroding day by day. It's time to foster investments that create decent and well-paid jobs, that help the young upgrade their skills, that promote gender equality and multiply opportunities for the many. This time, we need to promote investments that focus on the planet. We are on a collision course with nature. Our economies have imposed a heavy toll on the environment. Climate change is now breaking the delicate equilibrium of nature, threatening our health, our prosperity, and our social stability. The rate of biodiversity loss through the extinction of species has accelerated by at least 100 times due to human activity. Every year, we throw 20 million tons of plastic in the oceans with disastrous consequences to many species and to human health. Now, our new investments cannot ignore this environmental mess. This time, ladies and gentlemen, we need to foster investments that focus on creating prosperity. We need to build more intelligent frameworks. We need to build more incentives that stimulate stronger innovation and higher productivity. But we also need to extend the benefits of technological progress to all. This is the way in which we will be able to promote social inclusion, in which we'll be able to extend well-being. Our innovation capacity now offers promising solutions to huge global challenges, from poverty to climate change, from health to food security, skills, employment. But we need to align our innovation policies so that investments flow towards activities that create human prosperity. Activities that, as Professor Tim Jackson put it, so that human beings flourish, so that we can achieve greater social cohesion, so that we can find higher levels of well-being, and yet still reduce their material impact on the environment. The challenge is how to trigger this new wave of badly needed investments, in this new wave of this type of investment. It's about building the necessary frameworks, getting the right incentives, designing predictable and stable regulatory environments, scrapping restrictive product market regulations, doing away with barriers to trade and investment, strengthening public equity markets, making our financial system more resilient, more supportive of real economic activity. It's about providing the best possible research and development facilities. It's about promoting competition in key network industries. And it's about promoting competition in financial services too. And it's about improving financial literacy among SMEs. It is also essential to focus on sectors that need long-term investment, like green infrastructure. Institutional investors are a powerful source of long-term financing. By the end of 2013, there were tens of trillions in assets that were being held by these investment managers. Pension funds, insurance, reinsurance companies, hedge funds, money managers, etc. More than 100% of the GDP of the whole OECD. Enormous amounts, in the tens of trillions. But we have not been able to move them to the right places. We also need sound governance frameworks, effective, transparent public procurement systems, competent regulatory authorities, adherence to the rule of law, and a high-quality judiciary system, public sector efficiency, and accountability. Now, promoting this new wave of investments based on this new set of values, social inclusion, sustainability, will demand a new set of policies. The 2015 OECD Policy Framework for Investment, which we will launch and promote among our ministers during this week, provides a comprehensive checklist of key policy issues to help governments create an enabling environment for investments. But going beyond traditional tools will also demand a revision of the existing concepts, the existing theories, even the ones that we teach at our faculties of economics. It will demand a deep and critical revision of the role and curricula of business schools, MBAs. It will require a constant revision and an improvement in the economic awareness of international organizations like the OECD. And here, we're trying to achieve that with our new approaches to economic challenges initiative, so-called NAEC initiative. We very much expect that this forum becomes a launching platform for these efforts. You will be discussing social and environmental impacts of investment, the relationship to inequality, the potential of the sharing economy, the new production revolution, diversity in cities, educations, jobs, health, innovation, the opportunities of COP21, the Sustainable Development Goals, to mention just a few items. Very soon we will meet in Addis Ababa to discuss financing for development. This is our chance to influence policy. Dear friends, Madame la Ministre, Helen, ladies and gentlemen, it is time to create the next economy. Sounds simple, but it's an enormously ambitious goal. We need to imagine the new logics, the new system, the new regulations, the new incentives, the new policy frameworks of a more humane, more dignifying economic model, where the extinction of animal species is replaced by the extinction of youth unemployment, and where the dismantling of governments is replaced by the dismantling of conflict of interest and corruption, and where the ultimate goal is to multiply opportunities for inclusion, and where the role of investment is valued as the DNA of our future. So I invite you to be creative. I encourage you to be bold. I encourage you to partner with the OECD to build a brighter future in the design, the development, and delivering together better policies for better lives. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, the head of the United Nations Development Programme, Helen Clark.
Secretary General, OECD, Minister of Environment of France, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you, Angel, for inviting me to address the opening of the OECD Forum this year. I last addressed an opening of this forum 12 years ago at the invitation of your predecessor when I chaired the OECD Ministerial Council that year. It was a very stimulating forum then, and I'm sure it will be this year. And can I compliment you on this magnificent new conference facility that has been built since I last came to the forum. Well, I guess I'm here because it is a critical year for development. The international community is on the verge of agreeing on an ambitious and transformational development agenda which will be replacing the Millennium Development Goals. This agenda will be universal in nature. It will cover the 3 strands of sustainable development, and it will aim to address the many interlinked challenges our world is facing, and Angel has just outlined many of them. The agenda is relevant to countries rich and poor, from the OECD member states to the most fragile country. Without doubt, we've seen tremendous development progress in the time span covered by the MDG targets. We see between 1990 and 2010 extreme income poverty halved, and the likelihood of a child dying before their 5th birthday halved as well. We see now most children in developing countries enrolled in primary schooling, at least for some time. We see maternal death rates down, but not nearly enough. We see a lot of progress on combating HIV, malaria, and TB. And we see the goals set for access to improved sources of water being met. We also see in the bigger picture of things rapid growth in many emerging economies driving a process of convergence between the developing South and a rich and developed North, although very significant gaps still remain. But at the same time, inequalities in many countries have become starker. This has been very much a theme of Angel's comments this morning. Political, economic, and/or social exclusion and the lack of hope which goes with that have contributed to the rise of sectarianism and violence. Countries which have made the very least progress on the MDGs are those which tend to have suffered variously from conflict, disasters, poor governance, and/or little rule of law. Adding to these challenges, current patterns of consumption are generating levels of pollution with which our planet simply cannot cope. Overuse of the world's resources is undermining the ecosystem services on which each one of us depends, and that is particularly evident with climate change. These impacts threaten development achievements in all countries, and especially in the poorest and most vulnerable. So, the new global agenda, which emerges from 4 major processes this year, and we're running from a Sendai Conference on Disaster Risk Reduction in March, through Financing for Development in July in Addis Ababa, through the SDG Special Summit in New York in September, to the Paris Climate Change Conference in December. This whole new global agenda must take on these big challenges. The alternative would be to face a world characterized by even more turmoil and instability. And there really isn't a lot of time left to act. Already we see the burden of complex humanitarian emergencies weighing so heavily on people on the front lines of conflicts and disasters and on humanitarian relief budgets. Without doubt, OECD member states have a major role to play in supporting the new development agenda and in deploying their resources, their expertise, and their technologies in support of building a fairer and more sustainable world. At the heart of the new agenda, though, must be the unfinished business of the MDGs, including the urgency of eradicating hunger and poverty and the need to fight inequalities of all kinds. In the current set of proposed SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals, there are goals and targets which relate to economic growth, to infrastructure, to energy, and to strengthening capacities to trade and attract investment. The agenda also encompasses challenges which have become more pronounced over the past 15 years, such as environmental degradation, as seen in climate change and loss of biodiversity, and also rapid urbanisation. As well, and for the first time so explicitly, the proposed new global agenda affirms that development requires peaceful and inclusive societies, justice for all, and effective, accountable, and inclusive institutions at all levels. Development can be neither inclusive nor sustainable in the absence of peace and justice. Coming again to the theme of high inequality, which the Secretary-General has elaborated on this morning, a major task for the new agenda is tackling this very significant challenge in the endeavour to achieve a world without poverty. We must reach the most marginalised and excluded populations in countries rich and poor. Around the world, wealth, opportunity, and ultimately power is increasingly concentrated in the hands of the few. The richest 8% of the world's population earns half of the world's total income. More than 75% of the population of developing countries lives in societies which are more unequal today than they were 2 decades ago. Angel has made the point, but I will make it again, that across the OECD countries, the average income of the richest 10% of the population is almost 10 times that of the poorest 10%. And income inequality in the OECD, I understand, is at its highest level in half a century. High levels of income inequality do impose constraints on growth and development. When they intersect with health and education inequalities, poorer human development outcomes are the inevitable result. Horizontal inequality across whole groups of people, whether it be due to gender-related discrimination or related to geography, ethnicity, religion, age, disability, generates instability. It does contribute to higher rates of violence and erodes social cohesion. But stark inequalities in income and other dimensions of well-being are not inevitable consequences of development progress that we just have to accept. There are proven strategies for promoting inclusive and sustainable growth, which include directing investment to communities where the poor live and work, redistributing the benefits of growth through progressive taxation systems, universally accessible and quality services and social protection, and empowering women, youth, and marginalised communities to be full participants in their economies, societies, and polities. Overall, the generation of inclusive growth is very much about the political will to support an economy to grow in job-rich ways and to support quality services and social protection. The current proposals for the new Sustainable Development Goals prioritise tackling inequalities. Indeed, we could say that the importance of leaving nobody behind in development is a defining feature of this bold new agenda. So, to come to implementation, the new development agenda would remain mere words on paper unless it can be implemented. So a strong package on what is called, in the trade and the jargon, means of implementation will be critical. Capacities need to be strengthened. governance needs to be better. Citizens need to be engaged. We need renewed global partnerships for sustainable development. And while money isn't everything, access to financing is rather important. This third international conference on financing for development in Addis Ababa in July needs an outcome which is as bold and as ambitious as the new Sustainable Development Agenda promises to be. Of course, meeting official development assistance commitments and ensuring that ODA goes to the countries and the communities which need it most are critical. And the OECD and the Secretary-General are tireless champions of this cause and of aid and development effectiveness. UNDP is very pleased to be a partner with the OECD in providing the joint secretariat to the Global Partnership for Effective Development Cooperation, which brings together a very wide range of developing and developed countries in the quest for smarter aid which respects national ownership and systems. Such smart aid should certainly seek to support capacities for inclusive and sustainable growth, domestic resource mobilisation from that growth, and for the attraction of quality loans and investment. The conference in Addis Ababa, we think, also offers an opportunity to make some real commitments to combat the tax evasion and avoidance and illicit financial flows which are constraining efforts to raise domestic resources. Then, the range of challenges which the new global agenda is trying to tackle does require international public finance beyond ODA. More resources are needed for investments in areas ranging from communicable disease control to climate change adaptation and mitigation, and science, innovation, and new technologies. Implementing a bold global agenda requires the engagement of the world's private sectors and of citizens and their organisations. If regulatory frameworks address incentives which are currently poorly aligned, then private investment decisions are more likely to contribute to inclusive and sustainable growth. A commitment to inclusive business models, to creating shared value, and to corporate social responsibility helps a great deal too. On citizen engagement, there has been massive outreach from the UN in supporting national consultations on the new agenda, and through this global My World survey, which to date has engaged more than 7 million people in ranking their priorities for the new global agenda. And no surprises that the top 3 priorities rated globally and across every region were jobs, health, and education. What I think is even more interesting is that the number 4 priority came in as having more effective and honest governance. That says something to us about citizens knowing exactly where to lay the responsibility for things not being as they would wish. But another thing is very clear from the consultations, that people who are taking part and their organisations want to stay engaged. They don't want to be asked just at the beginning, what would you like? Oh no, they want to stay engaged. They want to be part of the ongoing design of policies and solutions and to play a full part as participants in implementation, in monitoring progress, and holding governments and other stakeholders to account. I think this is very positive. What then does this new agenda mean for OECD countries? Well, what a universal agenda clearly implies is that development is not just about something that happens to someone else somewhere else. The quest for attaining and sustaining high levels of human development is relevant to every country. A number of developed countries face significant challenges. For example, on gender inequality, where there is often a significant labour force participation and pay gap. Or challenges on social exclusion, where the socioeconomic status of Indigenous peoples and other minorities may remain persistently lower. or in ensuring that education systems really do offer learning for life so that people can adapt to a fast-changing society and economy. Today's developed countries, as well, showed scant regard for environmental sustainability and biodiversity on their route to advanced economy status. So not only must they mend their ways now, but they should also be supporting sustainable development pathways in developing countries to secure the future of our planet and the well-being of future generations. As well, implementing the new agenda will require that alongside the provision of ODA from developed countries, there is also much more international policy coherence across trade, taxation, and migration, among other areas. As well, developing countries will need readier access to the technologies of the North to enable them to make breakthroughs on sustainability. So in conclusion, achieving sustainable development calls for all of society change across the way we live, work, produce, consume, generate our energy, transport ourselves, design our cities, and more. This is a challenge for developed and developing countries alike. To achieve this kind of transformational change, very big partnerships are needed. The new agenda needs to seize the imagination of peoples and their governments, of civil society and the private sector. Higher levels of ODA and more catalytic ODA are needed. South-South and triangular cooperation will play a very important and growing role. The multilateral organisations, including those of the United Nations, the international financial institutions and the OECD, have critical leadership and support roles to play on implementation. And at UNDP, we're committed to playing our full part and look forward to continuing to work so closely with the OECD through the life of the SDGs as we have through the life of the MDGs. The challenge of the new agenda will be to lift all people out of extreme poverty in a generation and keep them out of extreme poverty. It will be to turn the tide for once and all on rising inequality and marginalisation and exclusion. Environmental degradation must be addressed decisively, including by acting now on climate change. And I thank the Minister of Environment of France for her very strong statements about the urgent need for all negotiators now to focus on the lead up to the Paris climate change talks for a quality outcome. We will also need for the new agenda better and more inclusive governance, effective institutions, the rule of law, and effective conflict resolution leading to peace and stability. If we all work together, there is a chance we can meet citizens' aspirations for peace, progress, prosperity and justice, and for the preservation of our planet. 2015 is a once-in-a-generation year for development, with the opportunity to have so many critical outcomes impacting on development coming to a head at once. There is the opportunity to put the world on an inclusive and sustainable course. There is an old saying that says, opportunity doesn't knock twice. So let's embrace it now. Thank you very much.
Mesdames, Messieurs, la ministre de l'Environnement de la France, Ségolène Royal.
French Minister of the Environment, Ségolène Royal. Good morning, everybody. I'd like to thank you, Secretary General, for having invited me here. And thank you, Helen Clark, talking about the fact that opportunity only knocks once. And I think that you took a wonderful initiative here at the OECD in order to contribute to the run-up to COP21. In fact, the OECD has always been a forum for debate and a think tank, and we do need that this year. Thinking of the Addis Ababa conference, Helen Clark has mentioned that, but also thinking of the adoption in September of the Sustainable Development Agenda, the SDGs. And those two events, of course, will represent a really high point for the Paris conference in December. You both have remarkably sketched out the situation, talking about the ambitions that we have ahead of us, the difficulties in order to reach them, the different stages that we need to go through, and all of the issues and problems that we are facing if we want to really rally the world to move forwards. Now, you decided today to talk specifically about the central role of investors of the future and innovation. And all of our countries, of course, need to move towards this new low-carbon economy, which is not only essential if we want to fight against climate change, but also is, I believe, a major factor for future prosperity. You said, of course, we've heard some interesting phrases being used today, creating economic activity and jobs, which also make it possible to fight more efficiently against inequality and poverty, because all of these things are linked, of course. That is what we can see today. All of these issues are closely linked, and I think there's now a consistency between the hopes of the developed countries and the hopes of the developing countries. It will help us to move out of the crisis, but also help the others to move out of poverty. So as a result of this, given that we share the same goals and values, moving towards a low-carbon economy, I think we can all achieve what we're striving for. That is the challenge of green growth and the new model of development that we are looking at. And this is promising for all of our countries. The OECD, for many, many years, has looked at these different dimensions, truly sustainable development. And I would like to pay tribute to the absolutely remarkable work you've done looking at public and private financing of climate investment, the policies which have been conducted in different countries, both the success stories and also things which need to be done to increase efficiency, but also the importance of the new relationship when we look at the alignment of policies for a low-carbon economy, which illustrates the need for consistency between different public policies helping this essential transition, which will be presented tomorrow during the ministers' meeting. These analyses, I think, are extremely valuable tools in order to feed into the public debate and to help decision makers and prepare COP21. I'd just like to share with you a few ideas. The first of these ideas is that nobody can avoid the effects of climate change. I think that seems obvious, but of course 23 years ago in the Rio conference, some of you may have been there, I was there myself, and that didn't seem so obvious today. I think we can stand up and say quite clearly that nobody can hope to avoid the effects of climate change. And that is the first thing that I wanted to say. Never in the long and sometimes disappointing history of climate negotiations have the conditions been brought together as they are today for us to then move forward in order to take a hold of our climate destiny. I say this because the effects of climate change are perceptible and can be seen in every region of the world. How can we be deaf to the cry for help from island states who are directly threatened by the increases in the sea level? And the French president, in fact, has talked about the Caribbean area and the Philippines. We want to answer this cry for help from the island states who are so directly threatened, which also is a major risk for 1/3 of the land area of Bangladesh, but also all of the shorelines, the deltas and the coastal towns in the north and the southern hemisphere. How can we be blind to this speeding up of extreme weather conditions, droughts but here, flooding there, all of them incredibly devastating in their effects, cyclones, typhoons hitting north and south, east and west. Even in my region, where 4 years ago, we were affected by the Hurricane Cynthia, with many, many victims never seen before in my region. So we're all affected by these issues. How can we not understand the dangers, the health dangers and food dangers, humanitarian security dangers that this speeding up in the climate drift is creating, not only for climate refugees, and if we don't act, their numbers will increase, but also for all of our continents and for the general balance of the world? How can we not gauge these increased risks, the vulnerability, precariousness, increased poverty, which are already being generated and which continue in the future if we do not act now? The truth is that Some are perhaps more exposed today than others, but nobody, no country can hope to escape this. And that is the first and foremost reason why we must stand up and do something to cooperate. Second idea, very simple. We now know that inaction costs us enormously, particularly since we know, given the work of the IPPC, the work of the OECD, of the International Energy Agency, of the PNUD, the Stern-Calderon report, and countless studies carried out by the United Nations Development Programme. All of these reports have showed us quite clearly that we all agree on the conclusions. We know that human activity is at the origin of climate change. We know that inaction will cost us and will cost even more. All assessments suggest that it's going to be several percentage points of GDP or billions of dollars lost. We know that sitting back and doing nothing makes no economic sense, and we know that climate drift and the cost drift for our economies and destruction of wealth and value go hand in hand. Third idea, we know that action will yield fruit. We also know that acting means we need investments, we need funding, but this is and that this is by far the most profitable solution. Profitable for human activity, for jobs, for the quality of life, for biodiversity. And many companies have now understood this. The World Bank believes that 2 percentage points of GDP could be obtained if we move towards a low-carbon economy. The International Energy Agency, the OECD, and many other bodies have shown that unlike the cost of doing nothing, if we focus on the green economy, we'll be focusing on growth. Because the fight against climate change is not the enemy of creating wealth and jobs, but in fact its ally, and in fact even its most important source. And in the poor countries where the climate threat represents one of the major obstacles, very often underestimated in the area of development, as in rich countries and in emerging countries. Third idea, or fourth idea I should say, economic realism and tackling the climate. These are indivisible. For many years, many thought that economic realism was the opposite of tackling the climate. We now know that they go hand in hand. I was in Rio in 1992. Many of you were there as well. And since that date, many things have not actually happened, but some things have actually changed, particularly, I think, awareness, which has really, really spread and sped up. I think now we understand that the economy, the environment, far from being opposite to each other, are closely linked. Companies, more and more companies, are now convinced of this and have decided to act as a result of that, as we saw a few days ago during the business summit, or the finance summit, which took place in Paris. The Climate and Business Summit, which was held last week in UNESCO, I think proved was a stark demonstration of the unprecedented mobilization of economic and financial players. This is a major watershed, and we should be happy to see this happening, and we should encourage it to speed up. Fifth idea, rising to the climate challenge is an opportunity and a chance. It's not a scourge, it's a wonderful opportunity. It is not a constraint, or not only a constraint, which we have to simply submit to. It's an opportunity or a chance. Why? Well, because it means we can innovate. It's an opportunity to create new activities, sustainable jobs. It's a chance for growth, a chance for prosperity, and a chance for development, for innovation, and for creativity, a chance for democracy. And this works in both directions. If the fight against climate change with the incredible potential of green and blue growth is an opportunity for the economy, one has to say loud and clear that the economy is an opportunity in order to fight more efficiently against climate change. Rallying companies, small and large, the financial sector is an absolutely essential condition if we want to take control of our climate destiny. I know that some people are skeptical and some people have a hard time believing that predatory behavior, which has created so much damage, can actually change, that we can go beyond simple superficial greenwashing. I know that NGOs are asking serious questions, and I believe that this is a far-reaching movement, and it will be even more sustainable if the governments of the entire world can stand up and be counted. I am convinced, as you said yourself, Secretary General, that we're entering a new world where the interests of companies and the financial sector may intermesh with the interests of the planet and humanity, on condition, of course, that we establish rules, transparency, and democracy. I believe, and I suggest you believe with me, that a new alliance is possible on a new basis between those who have taken advantage and those who have suffered. Once we can define the rules for a new climate justice and also create the necessary cooperation in order to reduce greenhouse gases, to help the most vulnerable, those who are most exposed, who are very often those who have the least to help themselves, in order to put in place adaptation measures which are so urgently needed. Sixth idea, we need to move from the battle of ideas to the battle of actual action. We are at the turning point in the history of humanity, and we have won the battle of ideas. That is already a wonderful victory in 20 years. The human origins of climate change, I think, have been proved. We know that economic efficiency and environmental efficiency can no longer exist one without the other. What we need to do now is to win the battle of action, which means mobilizing all those involved at the state level, at the non-state level. We need to bring together with the same target all of the strengths of our societies: citizens, regions, NGOs, researchers, companies. The question is not to know whether we should act, but how we should act. The targets, we know what they are. We need to reduce our greenhouse gases emissions and fossil energy consumption. We need to strive for energy efficiency, because the cheapest energy for countries, companies and households is energy which isn't wasted. Ramp up renewable energies, which all of our countries have and which today are increasingly competitive. Develop clean transport, recycling, circular economies, energetic renovation of housing and existing buildings, energy-saving building and sustainable cities, agroecology and agroforestry. Seventh idea, each country must make a commitment. Just a word about the energy transition law, which I am passing through Parliament in France at the moment, because France, which has the honor to chair the 21st Conference of Parties, has wanted to be fully involved and get fully involved at the international level, which is why our Parliament is, as I speak, adopting before the Paris summit the bill which I presented on the energy transition for green growth and a law on biodiversity, protection of nature and landscapes, in order to bring about the change in our energy model, help mobilize all public and private actors, mobilize the financial wherewithal accessible to everybody, in order to ensure that the fight against climate change, the development of a low carbon economy, and re-establishing a harmonious relationship between man and nature may be something which we can all be involved in order to ensure that the barrier of money will no longer be an obstacle, and we can have true participative environmental democracy. This hands-on approach is for us a contribution to the joint mobilization of all countries, and we want to see this happen. Eighth idea, solutions already exist, and particularly since those solutions are within our reach throughout the world. Very often initiatives have been taken at the regional level. We've seen a mushrooming of different achievements. We saw them outside in the lobby of the OECD, and today it's possible to spread these and to speed them up. And indeed, that is the aim of the solutions agenda, to illustrate this creativity, be it rich countries or poor countries, emerging countries or not. We can see everywhere concrete answers, hands-on answers being found. A lot is possible today, which wasn't perhaps or not sufficiently over the last decades, on condition that political resolve is stronger and that the risks of getting bogged down be set aside, on condition that we respect the interests of every country and we protect our common good, the climate. We can rally our efforts in order to achieve justice without wanting to provide a uniform answer, respecting the differences of each country and the responsibilities which are incumbent upon us, on condition that we are able to reorient the public and private financial flows towards the new climate economy, towards research and development, towards investment, green investment, and financing adaptation. A third industrial revolution is unfolding, the one that we're building, which brings together the digital economy and the green economy. Green chemistry, a new generation of eco-fuels, biosourced materials, electric cars, offshore wind parks, the ocean thermal energy, smart nets, positive energy buildings, frugal factories, eco-efficient agriculture, storage of intermittent energies, desalination plants using solar energy for the poorest countries, and countless other ideas. The area of the green economy is opening up to innovation and the spirit of enterprise, and there are countless examples. Ninth idea, we need stable rules in order to speed up this momentum, which is what the companies have said. That momentum has been launched. We need to speed it up. We need to act quickly in order to be more efficient, and we need clear, stable rules which provide visibility to the states, to the regions, and to the companies in order to look ahead and secure investments. And we need to ensure that all of the financial players, investors, bankers, insurers, rating agencies, regulators, understand, as they are beginning to do, and factor in the systemic financial risk and impairment of assets which are linked to climate change. Which is why I have put in the French law on the energy transition, thinking of this, rules. And I think this is we are the very first country to have done this, rules which allow companies and investors to better factor in climate change. Three innovations in this new bill. First of all, an analysis of finance risk linked to climate change and measures taken by the company in order to reduce them by setting up a low-carbon strategy in all areas of the company. This must now be part and parcel of the chairman of the board's report, which needs to be approved by the shareholders of the annual general meeting. Secondly, climate challenges will be better taken on board in reporting when it comes to corporate social responsibility, with the presentation of the consequences of climate change on the company's business and the use of its goods and services that it produces. Thirdly, for French institutional investors, there are quantitative targets spelled out to illustrate the green share of its investments and the wherewithal that it's using in order to reach those, but also a presentation of the carbon footprint of its assets. These legislative provisions, which are brand new and which were voted just a few days ago by the French Parliament, a part of a spreading trend and are part and parcel of a general movement which has really taken off since the New York summit in September of last year, where all these subjects were, of course, put onto the table. So decarbonization of portfolios is beginning at global level. Issuance of green bonds is turning out to be promisingly successful. It's now up to companies who in the past were very hostile to environmental regulation. They saw these as binding. Companies which were also against the principle of polluter pays now are increasingly demanding, in the wake of the World Bank's initiative, the establishment of a global price for carbon, which is indeed absolutely essential. In fact, 60 countries are already making CO2 being paid through using taxes or carbon markets, and more than 150 companies are already working in-house with a price on carbon. And I'm struck to see to what extent the world of companies and finances has turned out to be far more reactive and innovative, because they've understood that, of course, it was in the interest of the world economy and that they were actually going to see a return on investment. So let's make sure that these new rules, which are win-win rules, a virtuous circle, if you will, of course, based on rules which take on board everybody's interests, which allow free choice of development for each country, may speed up and may help us to move towards efficient action. By way of conclusion, I'd like to make three observations. The first is that technological innovation is a major key, a major issue in the fight against climate change. And the report of the International Energy Agency, which handed to me a month ago, does stress quite rightly that challenge. It says that we must ensure that more investments go into the energy sector. That stresses that countries which can perhaps jump one stage and move more directly to areas which are low in carbon CO2. Today, countries which are perhaps more handicapped, given the fact that they have less economic development, may well be able to become countries at the very head of the energy transition. I've said this thinking about island states. Peripheral areas could well become territories at the very heart of the energy transition, the ambition being to achieve energy independence for these areas, to explain the importance of technology transfers from rich countries to those who are less rich. But there again, we need rules which establish the legitimate share due to companies' profits and the necessary share of pooling of technologies so that poor countries may access them in order to join in this fight against climate change, in order to ensure that this fight be perhaps a springboard for development. Generalization of access to renewable energies is another important conclusion. And this, I'm thinking of villages in rural Africa and in major cities of industrial areas, can help us increase well-being and purchasing power for families. The French law on energy transition, for example, helps households to introduce changes in their households in order to achieve energy renovation. It's the poorest families that we must help and give them access to energy. In Tanzania, for example, where more than 81% of the population does not have access to electricity, and given the fact there is no national electric grid, providing rural families with small solar panels, which allows them to use LED lamps, a radio, small electrical appliances, would allow them to replace the candles or kerosene lanterns and diesel generators. So these are revolutions which can easily be put into place. Very simple revolutions. Decentralized. In the area of fatigue, I personally saw in Senegal, because my region, Poitou-Charentes, is twinned with fatigue, and we've signed cooperation or decentralized cooperation agreements. The arrival in the villages of solar ovens has relieved women of having to spend hours gathering wood and has managed to stop deforestation. They were able to use this time that's been freed up to learn. And with the solar lights, the children can now do their homework and read far better after the sunset. These are just a few examples to show that green economy, social progress and access to education have to go hand in hand. And access to energy is access to peace, to education and to culture. They're closely linked. Once you provide energy, solar energy in small villages, the children obviously go to school more, learn more. Families gather around the lights in the evening to read, to discuss, to exchange. And it's access to education and culture, so closely linked to energy. And it's not surprising. Energy is life. Without energy, there can be no life. And so result, disseminating renewable energy, solar energy, also means giving dignity and education and culture to all. So there's a lot still to be done before the climate summit in Paris, and I am aware of that. I'm very optimistic when I see the mobilization of everybody, when I see the new ideas which are emerging, when I see the progress achieved in the area of innovation and technology, when I see the sharing, global sharing, when we understand what's going on, what's ahead of us, the urgency. I'm optimistic because I think the world is moving forward. Citizens, companies, regions. It's a huge challenge that we have to rise to, a challenge because there's suffering, but also because we just set aside the suffering and create the basis for a new form of harmony between the men and the women who populate this planet and the environment, which has been so much destroyed. But today we have the technological wherewithal, the innovation, the intellectual wherewithal, the democracy and the culture and the education to re-examine this relationship between human beings and their environment. And I believe that we have everything we need to succeed. And when I see that churches want to do this, there's going to be a summit of churches in Paris, and in September, the Secretary General of the United Nations has invited the religious authorities to do something. And I think that this means that the challenge that we need to rise to is a challenge for civilizations. It's a challenge for humanity. And it's up to us who have the knowledge, who have the conviction to rise to meet this challenge together in order to make sure that the Paris conference is a success. And when I see the quality of the work achieved here in the OECD, the mobilization that you have brought about working with the United Nations in the area of development, I believe that we have everything we need to succeed. As a result, I think that we will succeed. We will achieve this. And this week, I know that a lot of new ideas will be raised. This movement will speed up. And together, we will meet again and succeed in December, rising to this challenge and prove that human intelligence, different forms of human intelligence, can rally together and create collective intelligence, which will allow us to live a better lives together on our planet. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, if I could ask you to please remain seated while our speakers leave the auditorium. We will let you out in just a moment, I promise. There will be a 15-minute break now. Sessions recommence at 10:15 or shortly thereafter. A very quick reminder, the sessions are unlocking investment in here, addressing inequality in the green amphitheatre, and the sharing economy in the pink amphitheatre. I wish you all a successful and a very fruitful Forum 2015. Thank you very much.